Hello gang, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the Novice Lumberjack, where I'm going to talk about my top 5 picks for beginning porters, right? People who want to dip their feet in the water and feel safe doing so. And so with that being said, let's jump right into it. Number 1, we are not going to work our way up to number 1. We're going to start with it. Number 1, my number 1 pick for you guys that are new to doing this and you're wanting to play around, absolutely, hands down, unequivocally, the Zenoah clone. These are, they make them in like 49 cc's as well, but typically you're going to see them, just type in Chinese clone 5200, 5800, 6200. Right, they're going to come in different displacements. They're always a lie. They say 6200 and it's like, no, it's not. 62 cc's. No, it's not 62 cc's. Turns out it's 58 or 59. They say 5800. Turns out it's 54 cc's. 5200, that's a 49 cc. Blah, 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 back and forth. But why are these so good for beginning porters? Number 1 reason, cheap. All right, cheap to purchase. You can buy one of these brand new for anywhere from like $89 to like $230, depending on which one you get. There's all kinds of them. This right here is the Weimars. I don't know if any more of them are even available. There's the Salem Master. There's the John Cutter. John Cutters are really good and they're usually really available. So I would probably say get one of those, but they're orange. Boo. And let's see, what else are there? There's some of them that look like steels. They're the Pro-Yama, did I already mention that? Pro-Yama's, I got one up there. You see it, it's that orange one right there. And now that one actually, they call it a 6800. And it's actually like 62 cc's right there at it somewhere. So any of these Zenoah clones, just like I said, type in Zenoah clone 5200, 5800, 6200, you're going to come up with something. And they have different styles. Some of them have a more curvy looking plastic. Some of them have less. Typically what's going to key you in on if it's one of those Zenoah clones is you're going to look for your gas cap, and right above it a vibration mount eliminator, and right here see the way that the cutout around the oil cap. You're also going to see the muffler is going to look like that. I drilled an extra hole right there. Typically they're only going to come with 2 muffler outlets. And the handbrake will clue you in on it. Anyways, they can look different, but as long as you look for the right things, you're going to get one of the Zenoah clones. So cheap. If you screw it up to buy a new piston and cylinder, typically they're only about 20 bucks. So it's a great way to start. And they also typically don't need a lot of machine work in order to get good results. So great, right? Really great thing to start out with. And you can have fun and play with it and go, wow, I actually made a difference. And you don't like crush your wallet. Number 2, the Holtz Forma G366. You can find these in multiple different places, but my guide to get these is Jason at TristarSupplyLLC.com. I've done a lot of work to this one. It is running on nitro and it is killing it right now. The reason I like that, and if you follow this channel, you know that I like the Swedish saws, the Husqvarna, Jonsered, that stuff. And I want to say specifically, I do not recommend a clone 372 for beginners. Why is that? It's because they've got a funky intake. It works fine and everything, but these Chinese clones, lots of times those funky intakes, whenever they put them together sloppy, and you get an intake leak. You also, a lot of times, the timing is way off on it. Also, a lot of times there are bolts that are holding the oiler in place, I think. You got to back those out and put some silicone on there and put them back in, or else you'll get an air leak in there, because a lot of times they go all the way through to the case, and the screw itself isn't going to seal it properly. So a lot going on with the 372 clone saws that make them undesirable for people who are new to this. And you might run into issues and you think that you screwed it up. No, it just got screwed up in China, you know? So I wouldn't recommend those to the new guys that are just trying to port something, all right, for that reason. Number 3, Husqvarna 2 series. We're talking about the Husqvarna 61, the 266, the 268, the 272. That chassis right there. And if you want to get clone saw, get a clone saw. If you want to get an old 61 off of Facebook Marketplace for $100 and then put a 272 piston and cylinder setup on it, do it. Have fun. Those things, you can get great results. They run really good. You can have a lot of fun. They're a great little chassis. And did I mention this is number 3? Yeah, I think I did. So there's a lot of benefits to going with that, especially if you are a first-time porter. You're just starting to get into this, right? So now, moving on up into the price range with number 4, we're going to hit you right in the nuts with a Dolmar / Makita 6100. Now that is an odd bird to pick in a top 5 to begin with porting chainsaw, right? Chainsaw to be ported. Well, why is that? Well, it's because you don't have to do machine work. You don't have to do machine work. Now, you might have to take a little bit off of the piston, but if you can do that. You can do it. Don't be afraid. So if you remove the base gasket on that Dolmar or Makita, then that piston is going to slap the combustion chamber. Right? But it's just lightly slap it. And you can figure out ways. You can take a piston. Ooh. This right here is an Echo 590 piston, right? And literally, if you wanted to draw a line, like you can see where I drew that line, and then just actually sit there with a rotary tool and take a little bit off of the top all the way around up to that line, you could do that and it would be fine. I used to be there, okay, but people are way too scared of removing material from their piston. You should not be. Yeah, if you go getting crazy down here, all around on the skirt and stuff and in the supports and things like that, then you can cause problems. But as long as you've got a good amount of depth between the top and then the ring, this is called your crown, right? You want to have no less than 50 thousandths of an inch between the top of your ring, right there, top of your ring to the top of the crown. So as long as you don't go crazy, you'll be fine. And so with the Dolmar 6100, I know that you can do that, right? And then you're running a real good, nice, tight squish, and you've got good compression. And you got to know what you're doing. But hey, I've put out videos on it. So just type up Novice Lumberjack, Makita 6100, and I've done it, and great results. My Makita 6100 is so damn fast. It's a blur, and there are no timing advancements needed, nothing. I did almost all the port work on the piston itself, okay? Now, so it's a good one to start with. Even though it's a pretty expensive saw and they're kind of hard to find, you get great results with minimal need for proper machine work, okay? So that's your number 4. I got one over there, but I'm not going to get it. And number 5 then, we're going to jump up into the Husqvarna 3 Series and what we're talking about there. Well, honestly, anything. I was meaning the 372, the 365, those saws. Yeah, I'm going to stick with that. I'm not going to say the 350 or the 353 or the 346 XP because they've got shit intakes. They're trash. Now, you can get them to work fine and, you know, and all that stuff. It's all good. However, you can very easily have problems with that intake. Very easily have problems with that intake. So I'm not going to add the 346 as a good one to start with. Plus, they're expensive to deal with. There's no clone of them at all. 372, there are a multitude of clones. And so you can, I would recommend one of the OEM ones. And then if you want to use clone parts to support it, like get a blown up 372 real cheap, and then just put a made in China cylinder on it. It's an easy way to go. It's cheap. You get to play around and you see great results. Those things all poured up really, really, really well. So that's it. Number 1, the Zenoah 5200 clone in any CC size you want. I recommend going as big as possible. Get the 6200 or if you got the money, get the Pro Yama 6800. The G366. Actually, no, you know what? I do not recommend the Pro Yama 6800 for new porters because that piston and cylinder can be hard to get. And if you screw it up, you're up the creek without a paddle. So I would recommend sticking with the 6200, the 5800, or the 5200. Now, number 2, the G366. Wait a minute, we already did this. So I'm on to, yeah, I'm just repeating. Number 3, the Husqvarna 2 Series. We're talking about the 61, the 266, 268, 272. Number 4, we're stepping up the budget and we're going with a Dolmar / Makita 6100. And number 5, a Husqvarna 3 Series. The 365 or the 372 XP. If you want to mess with the X-Torque stuff, that's up to you. I don't even want to touch them. And it's not because they're good. They're good saws. They're just not as good as the original. So why go that route? Whenever I find them, I don't see any difference in price between an X-Torque and a non-X-Torque. So might as well get the non-X-Torque. They're clearly better. They're lighter weight and more powerful and rev faster. So why even go with an X-Torque? Not that the X-Torques are bad. They just aren't as good. Now, the important things that I was looking at. With all of these saws, you don't need to do machine work, right? A lot of things need machine work, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But with all of these saws that I've listed, you can get by with really good, really decent results without any machining whatsoever. Also, like carb upgrades. That's a big one, right? You're playing around, you want to get as much power as possible. Well, what has carburetor upgrades? Well, that Zenoah, you can definitely upgrade that carb in a couple of different ways. Right, you can put a 372 XP carb on there, which is what I have on that Wemars. You can put the larger 6200 carburetor, I believe this is right, onto the 5200, and stuff. So there's some options with carbs, and they're cheap. I mean, they're raining from the sky. You can get one of those things for like 12 bucks. And so it's really nice. Also, the 366, it's a known upgrade. It's a really big, good one. I've done it on my channel. Look up G366 carburetor, and you'll novice lumberjack, and you'll find what I've done. And I used a 460 carburetor, a Stihl MS 460 carburetor, and it made a world of difference. And you know, stuff like that's fun, right? Parts availability. Anytime that you're building a saw and you're not good, you know, the chances of you screwing something up are pretty high. You want to make sure you're working on something that has good parts available, and that's why you will not see a single Stihl on this list. Yeah, you got the G366, but it's Chinese, and OEM Stihl parts are magnificently expensive. And like try and replace a piston and cylinder, an OEM piston and cylinder on a Stihl 361. Woo, right? All of their stuff is really expensive. And so, yeah, with all the stuff that I've picked out, you have good parts availability. The one thing that's a little not so good is that Dolmar Makita. You can still buy everything OEM, right, and stuff, and you can find a lot of stuff used on eBay, but parts availability is not really good on that. That's why it's number 4. But you can get really great results without machine work. That's why it's on the list. And then, let's see, timing advance. If you get an actual OEM Husqvarna 3 Series, you don't need to do a timing advance. You might actually get better results with a timing advance, but you're not going to be like, it's still lacking something, unless you're really wanting to build like a race saw, right? Same thing with the Husqvarna 266 chassis. They respond pretty well to a small timing advance, but you don't need it at all. The one that I built, I did, have I done 2 now? Well, I've done John Sered's. Just one. I did a 625 and I did a 266, and neither of those had a timing advance, and they both ran good. Anyways, you get my point there. The things that I'm looking for that are good for beginners. And you know, you do the port job, you run it, and you go, wow, all right, good job. And then you go, I want to go a step further. Then you try the timing advance. And so, anyways, it's fun, it's easy. And the Zenoah clone, again, you can buy a flywheel for that for like 15 bucks, so, you know. Muffler mods. You want an easy muffler to modify. All of these on the list are, again with that Dolmar, I think it was pretty tough to modify. Let me see. Okay, so I did not have to cut the muffler in half. So that's reasonable to modify. That's the way I see it. However, they are made out of a material, I don't know if it's stainless steel or what it is. Maybe it's tin, but it's hard to solder and things like that. But the Zenoahs are easy to modify. The 366 Holzforma was easy to modify. The Husqvarna 266s, I mean, if they're not easy to modify, it's easy to buy a Chinese muffler for them. You know, it's all kinds of stuff. The Husqvarna 3 Series is pretty easy to modify. So all of these things are what I'm looking at and going, for a beginner, what do they need? They need something that doesn't necessarily need to have machine work. They need something that's going to be well supported by the aftermarket or simply by buying used parts. They need something that, you know, it's easy and fun to grab a carburetor upgrade and things like that. Timing advance, not necessary, but could be beneficial. And an easy muffler to modify. Now, this brings me to why I am not listing, well, they're here, an Echo 590 or an Echo 4910. They're, in my area, extremely easy to come by. I can get them almost any day of the week. A saw that runs like brand new for $200. A saw that actually is brand new for $250. You know, I mean, the Home Depot take back and things in this area, it just rains Echo 590s and also the 4910s. The 4910s. And the 590 is going to go away too. It's just a matter of time. But the 4910 has already went away. So get them while they're still out there if you haven't messed with them. But the reason why I don't want to put these on the list, even though you can port them and get good results and stuff, is two. Number one is they pretty much need port work or machine work. They need it. Right? And then also whenever you're doing those transfers, if you don't have a nice angled handpiece, a 90-degree handpiece, it can be nearly impossible to grind those upper transfers because they're hard as rocks and they're sloped, which means you can't just get in there. Like a lot of times you reach in there and just go, and it's not too big of a deal. But whenever they're sloped, you can't bite on anything. It's really hard to port the upper transfers on those things. So you got to have machine work. They're not very easy to actually do the ports on the transfers. And then also the muffler mod is absolutely terrible on the 590s. The 4910 not so much. But the reality of really needing machine work is the big problem. You know, you kind of need it, like need it. I know there's some folks that have done port jobs without the machine work, and you know, maybe you guys got good results and stuff like that. But the squish area or the squish depth is so deep on the Echoes and the Shindaiwas that unless you're going to do actual machine work to it, I'm like, I don't know, I just don't see it. So that's why I didn't put them in there, even though I can get them a lot of times as cheap as I can get a clone, you know, like 5200, you know, sometimes. I can get them super, super cheap. And they burn up the pistons in them all the time. Right? And you say, well, whoa, they're a junky saw. No, it's the operator. They've got a heavily baffled up muffler, and a person that walked into Home Depot and bought it, went out and they worked in it with a tree service or whatever, and they gave it to the ground man, and the chain got dull, and they just overheated everything, and it burns up that piston. But oh, this one's already got some work done on it. This was a burnt up cylinder, and I cleaned it up and it's perfectly usable, you know. So the cylinders are really, really good, really good. However, the cylinders are really good, but you got to machine them to get really good performance, I think. Anyways, this is long enough. If you're wanting to get started, start with the Zenoah 5200. Then whenever you think you got it figured out, You go, all right, cool. I got that. I did good work. Get a Holtz Forma G366. I wouldn't recommend getting the steel, and because, you know, just to get one, you know, a shitty chassis, everything, I mean, bad. You're looking at $400 around here for a 361 for a shitty one. So I'm like, no, just get the Holtz Forma. They are great. I mean, I have had no issues with mine, and it freaking runs titties. If you don't want to do that, you don't like steel, then, you know, bypass it completely and go to a Husqvarna 266. Get a clone if you want. You know, they're fine too. They don't seem to have the issues with those as they do with the 372 clone saws. Then, you know, you're like messing around, you're like, okay, I want to step up my game and go to something a little bit different. Domar Makita 6100. And then finally, for the big bucks, an actual OEM Husqvarna 3 Series, and we're talking about a 365 or a 372 XP. And have fun. Have fun.